الحمد للإله سابغ النعم وخالق الإنسان من بعد العدم، فالحمد ثم الحمد ثم الحمد لك حمدا كثيرا طيبا يا رب لك. أعطيتنا خيرا كثيرا ربنا، سترت عن كل الورى عيوبنا، ثم الصلاة بعد والتسليم على النبي المصطفى الكريم.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa wala amma ba'd. Today we'll continue part 2 of our lecture on zakah. It'll be a little bit technical, but I apologize for that, but it needs to be done in terms of how to give zakah. And I want to begin by stating that modern rules of zakah are obviously varied. We're not talking about classical fiqh, we're talking about stocks, we're talking about mutual funds, we're talking about 401k. Obviously, our modern scholars have tried their best to make ijtihad, and you will find a spectrum of opinion. Therefore, my advice to you all, don't play games with the Sharia. Allah knows your intention. Allah knows you're trying your best, and Allah will judge you based upon your intention. Try your best, and Allah knows your sincerity. Ask the Shaykh that you trust, and then follow that advice. So very briefly, how do we give zakat on our liquid assets? Technically, zakat is due on the amount that a person has owned for a whole lunar year, as we said. So our scholars, in trying to make Islam easy for us, they gave us a simple rule. They said, the fact that most of us are salaried employees and that our bank accounts are going to vary every single month, they advised us the following: choose one date of the year. And we're doing this lecture in Ramadan because most of us choose a date in Ramadan. 15th Ramadan, 20th Ramadan, 1st Ramadan. Choose one date of the year. That is your zakat date. And every single date, that same date, all that you do is you look at your liquid assets on that date and you pay 2.5% of your liquid assets on that date. You look at what you have in your bank account. You look at the cash that you have. You look at everything that is basically liquid assets on hand on that day, and you simply assume it to be your standard for the entire year. Now, alternatively, if you want to do the advanced, then technically you have to see every single month from the last year how much you've had. You make a graph and a chart, and it gets very, very complicated very fast. That's why our scholars said the easy way, and inshallah it is permissible, because most of us on salaried checks, we're living on our salary checks. By and large, our bank account varies slightly up and down. We have a steady balance. We know what that is. And generally speaking, we have the similar amount on that date of our zakah. So we simply assume on that date and we calculate simple 2.5%. Now that's liquid assets. That means our bank accounts. That means any cash that we have on hand. That means, as we said yesterday, the jewelry that is gold and silver. How about stocks? Stocks, once again, there are 3 or 4 opinions, and I'm not going to complicate things. I'll try to give you the simplest possible, but it can't be that easy. We have to divide stocks into 2 categories. The first are those that are active day traders. They go in, they're aggressive, they're monitoring the price, they're seeing when it goes up or down, they're going to sell. As soon as the price is right, they want to sell it. And the way you know active traders, you know who they are because they're checking the prices almost daily, maybe 10 times a day. They're actually day traders, they sell in the morning and day 8 times maybe. But if you're actively monitoring the price and you're wanting to sell as soon as the price is amenable to what you want, this is your active stock trading. You will deal with it like you deal with business merchandise, which means 2.5% of the paper value of the stock on the day of your zakah. So if your 20th Ramadan is the day of your zakah and you're an active stock trader, for example, you're buying and selling Uber, or you're buying and selling even a Bitcoin would be the same thing. So if you're buying and selling these types of stocks actively, or even Bitcoin is a type of currency, so if you're actively buying and selling on the 20th of Ramadan, you simply log on, you look at your value, and that 2.5% will be your zakat. Simple as that. Done deal. The problem comes, what if it's not an active trade? What if you are a long-term investor? What if you're just putting it into a mutual fund and you really are not monitoring the price, and it's really meant for a rainy day, it's meant for something long-term? And this is where really you get a spectrum of opinion, and it is a gray area. And I'm going to try to make it simple. Actually, I had a discussion with one of my teachers and mentors today so that I can give you an opinion that is coming from somebody more knowledgeable than me. And after a long discussion, and he's an expert in Islamic finance, the problem with mutual funds is that the zakat would only be due on those assets that are tangible. And so it gets a little bit complicated. To make it very short, what he suggested, if you have a mutual funds that is long term, which means you are not actively buying and selling, in that case, your zakat will be between 0.5 to 1% of the paper value. How he got to this percentage is a little bit more complicated, and I don't want to confuse you all, but the point is that on average, 30% of the mutual fund is zakatable, not 100%. Why? Because if it's a long-term investment, zakat is only due on the tangible assets, not on the services. And on average, a mutual fund might have around 30 to 40% of tangible assets. So basically, between 0.5 to 1%, if your mutual funds is more in the services sector, it'll go down. If it's more in the actual, if you're in the oil industry, you're actually in the mutual funds of buying and selling oil, mutual funds of gold. In that case, his tangible assets is going to go up a little bit more to the 1%. But basically, a rule of thumb, long-term investments that are mutual funds that you're not actively involved in buying and selling, then the zakat is roughly 30% of that value. So that translates as between 0.5 to 1% of the paper value that you're going to see on the day of your zakat. The 20th of Ramadan, you log on and you give between 0.5 and 1. 0.5 if it is more services, and 1 if it is more 1% if it's more actual tangible assets. That's the range that my teacher and mentor gave. Now we move to the other problematic issue, and I'm going to confuse you a little bit more as well, and that is the 401k or the retirement one. I know some of you already know what is going to come right now. I've been on this podium, mashallah, tabarakallah, 9 years in a row. Every year I give a lecture on zakat in Ramadan, and I have vacillated my opinion back and forth twice in the last 9 years. Now I'm going to vacillate one more time, 3 times, changing. And it's not my fault. This is Allah's qadr on us that we keep on changing our minds in this regard. And inshallah, it's a sign also of active research. 401k is definitely a very, very discussed area amongst the ulama. And for when I first came here, the fatwa I gave all of you, you should give zakat on the 401k amount. Around 5-6 years ago, I changed my position to that of Shaykh Qadhi and others who said you don't give zakat, and so you give 0 zakat. Then 3 years ago, I joined the Fiqh Council of North America. For the last 2 years, we have been debating 401ks in our meetings. We are constantly, this has been the number one issue for the last 2 years of the Fiqh Council. What is the zakat on 401ks? Now, and in fact, we just finished our meeting last month, so the Fiqh Council of North America, which is the senior most oldest body of Islamic scholars of North America, and alhamdulillah, I'm a member of that, and I will respectfully follow their positions, and I'm a member, I have to follow their position as well. And actually now, they have convinced me of this as well, that in fact, the position that is now from the Fiqh Council is the following, and that is that the fatwa is that you will give zakat on the amount that is cashable after penalties and taxes. Okay? If you were to access that 401k, whatever the penalty is, get rid of it. Whatever you would get taxed, get rid of it. Then that final amount, 2.5% of that theoretical amount. Let me give you a simple example. Suppose your 401k had 200,000 in it, and you have a 20% penalty if you were to cash it out. So if you have a 20% penalty, that makes it to 160,000. Suppose your tax bracket is roughly 25%. So 160,000 then goes to 120,000. Okay, now you calculate 2.5% of that 120,000, and that works out to $3,000. $3,000. That's ma'qul, that's reasonable. If your 401k is 300,000, then $3,000 is, or sorry, 200,000, then $3,000 is reasonable amount for you to give. Now, one of the discussions in our Fiqh Council was, what if somebody is at the end of retirement, he has 300,000, or 200,000, excuse me, but he doesn't have 3,000 of his check to give. What does he do then? So the fatwa then is the following. It's very simple. 3,000 is a debt owed to Allah, and Allah will forgive that debt until you can pay it. So if you can pay 1,000 of that 3,000, you pay it now, and you write down on a piece of paper 2,000 for 2019. Next year, another 2,000. Next year, another. When you finally cash out your 250,000, if you actually add it up, your debt owed was going to be maybe 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 in zakat. And so you will pay it when you cash out. But it is a debt owed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah will not ask you to forcibly cash out your 401k if you cannot afford to pay. So very simple. You pay what you can of that 2.5% that is cashable. Clear enough? And whatever you cannot, you just make a note of it, that for this year I wasn't able to pay that much, and it is an easy debt. It's a non-binding debt until you cash out the 401k. When you cash out the 401k, then you add up those debts, and generally speaking, it's not payable for those of us that are struggling at the end of our retirement, not at the beginning. At the beginning, the 401k will be 15,000, 25,000, 35,000, going to be reasonable. But towards the end of our, closer to retirement, maybe it is a very large amount and we cannot afford to pay, in which case, عَفَى اللَّهُ عَمَّا سَلَفَ لَا يُكَلِّفُ اللَّهُ نَفْسًا إِلَّا وُسْعَهَا. You pay what you can, and you just make a note that I wasn't able to pay this much, and when you actually cash out the 401k, you will then pay that as zakat, as a one-off. And this is, I think, a reasonable fatwa, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. The final issue that we're going to discuss is zakat on business commodities. What if you own a business? Those who buy and sell business commodities, those who buy and sell merchandise, for example, you own a gas store, a convenience store, you own a furniture store, you must give zakat on the value of the commodities that are actually purchased and sold. And you will calculate 2.5% on the day of your zakat. So 20th of Ramadan, you will do an inventory, your stock, and whatever is the retail value, whatever is the general market value of that merchandise, you will pay 2.5% of zakat on that. And Allah knows you're trying your best, you're not having a trick that the day before your zakat is due, you get rid of your merchandise. Allah knows this, that you're playing a fair game, and whatever is the 2.5% on the day of your zakat, that is going to be calculated. Zakat is due only on merchandise that is purchased and sold. If you own something that you rent, for example, rental property, for example, you own a house and it is meant for rent, you do not give zakat on the cost of the house. You give zakat on the rental income that you have had for a year. So basically, if you have a house that you're renting out, you're going to get money. The money is going to go in your bank account. Therefore, the zakat will be on the money with the rest of your money that you will calculate on the 20th of Ramadan. Zakat is not due on the cost of the item that is rented. Zakat is only due 2.5% on merchandise that is purchased and sold. And I said the final point, one other point, zakat on loans. Zakat on loans. When it comes to loans, in a nutshell, the Sharia distinguishes between what are called hard loans and soft loans. And to put it in a very easy manner, if the money is as if it is non-existent, you can ignore it. Suppose you gave somebody $10,000 and the person is in struggling circumstances. You don't know when this person is going to pay back. Then there is no zakat because you don't have anything of that. But suppose the person has now the capacity to pay you back, but you're just not asking because you don't need it. I mean, okay, whenever I want to, I'll ask it back. And you know that this brother, or you assume that this brother can pay you back 10,000. In this case, there is zakat. You will have to add it that, hey, this person owes me 10,000, and all I have to do is make a phone call, but I don't need it. That's why I just don't want to cause any issues. Whenever I need it, I'll call him. In this case, the 10,000 will be added to the amount of zakat. However, if it's a soft loan and also a long-term loan, then there is no a deduction of zakat, because all of us have long-term loans that are payable in installments. If we were to do that, the average Muslim has a mortgage, and so all of us are negative assets anyway. We do not take into account large long-term loans when it comes to zakat. We ignore them. We have a house mortgage of $300,000. That does not come under zakat. There is no calculation. We don't subtract $300,000 from our net assets, or else every one of us would be negative. It's only short-term loans that are solid, that we know we have access to. Those are the ones that we will add to our zakah. Otherwise, we do not add that to our zakah. Obviously, zakat cannot be given on haram money. The purpose of zakat is to purify. So if we seek Allah's refuge, if one of us has income that is haram, the concept of paying zakat on that is ludicrous. It is nonsensical. It doesn't make any sense. The purpose of zakah is to purify. And so if a person owns a liquor store, if a person has something completely haram and they're getting getting this money completely from haram. This is the month of Ramadan. They need to repent from that money in totality, and they should get rid of that money and give it to the poor. Allah will reward them for their pure intention and not for the deed and money itself, because the money is filthy. Wallahu tayyibun wa la yaqbalu illa tayyiba. Allah only accepts that which is pure. And to conclude, therefore, try your best. Fattaqullaha mastata'tum. This is the month of Ramadan, the month of charity. Try your best to make a reasonable calculation of zakah. Diversify your investments in zakat as well. Give to various funds as well. And if you allow me a quick plug, I myself have a project that I'm doing, which is to open up a school for the Kashmiri refugees, which is zakat eligible, because 10% of them are orphans, so that zakat goes to the orphans. I have visited the province and I'm directly involved. If you're interested, you can come and speak to me or log on to the videos as well. But give zakat to every single charity that you feel comfortable, and the best zakat that you give will be to extended family and relatives that need it. And the best zakat is not told to them, it is given to them as a gift, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows it is zakah. May Allah accept our sadaqah in this month, and inshallah we'll continue regular khataras tomorrow. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
صلى عليك الله يا خير الورى تعداد حبات الرمال وأكثرا صلى عليك الله ما غيث هما فوق السهول وبالجبال وبالقرى فوق السهول وبالجبال وبالقرى.